This is Steve Zeltzer with Workweek, and one of the important struggles of workers' democracy, workers' rights, is taking place in Chicago with ATU Local 241. And there was a struggle there for democracy in the union of the rank and file and the membership. And one of the activists, Erek Slater, who's with us, as a result of that struggle, was elected to the executive board and began a fight in the local for democracy and also to deal with the conditions of the workers, the transit workers in Chicago, the Chicago Transit Authorities. And so joining us on the show to talk about that is Erek Slater, who's a fired CTA worker and was fired while he was on the executive board. Brad Thomson, who's a attorney in Chicago with the People's Law Office. And Robert Thomas, who's a CTA worker, and he's running for the executive board, and he's been fighting around conditions for drivers in the CTA. Welcome to our show.
Thank you.
Erek, why don't you talk about this long struggle you've been battling for how long in Chicago in transit to better the conditions of workers and the people who use this service? And it seems you've faced firing yourself twice for taking up a fight to make things better for the workers and the users of the system.
Yeah, well, it's been going on for generations. There's some fighters back in the 60s that are still around that they were facing some of the same things. It's a real war at the workplace between management and rank and file workers, transit workers. For this, we have the second largest system in the United States, behind New York, and we have over 2,000 bus operators, many hundreds of mechanics, office workers that do this work. That's just in our local union, Amalgamated Transit Union Local 241. But this has been going on for some time. Basically the city cannot or will not tolerate a powerful union, will not tolerate an independent voice of transit workers. And so when some honest shop stewards start to develop and get a base, they try to cut us down. I was elected, it's been about 10 years ago. My coworkers asked me to run for executive board, which is basically a shop steward position. And almost immediately there was a war against the position because I wouldn't play the management rules. I was only for my coworkers, not for trying to be some kind of intermediary between the bosses and my employer. And then they fired me illegally in 2016. We won that through an international campaign. And thank you for some of your efforts too, Steve, getting the word out. We went all over the world. And then again, they fired me in 2020. While I was an executive board member, because I was an executive board member after George Floyd was murdered. And we simply held a meeting on property, as we've done hundreds of times. That meeting was disrupted by management illegally, and then they fired me on the spot. All we did was ask workers if they felt safe driving police shuttles. They were using the public transit system to shuttle police and National Guard to the protests against police brutality, and many workers were not okay with that. So we're discussing our position, trying to make a union position. That's when they fired me. So fast forward here, and I hope Brad and Robert can talk about. We just had another fight where we decided to run a political campaign to try to show another way forward in the union. And I ran for president. And during the campaign, CTA management called the police dozens of times to have me removed under the guise that I was a fired worker because they had illegally fired me. So they called the Chicago police to remove me. And they finally actually arrested me the day before the election. And they thoroughly put their hand on the election. So they arrested me, charged me with trespass, and then we had this trial. So it's been so kind of the People's Law Office. I also want to mention Jim Fennerty also helped and handed over the case over to Brad. And Brad and the People's Law Office did a great job. Robert just testified in court a couple of days ago, and we finally won. We had the case thrown out. So I was hoping you guys could bring up some of that stuff as well.
So, Robert, you testified. What did you say at this hearing that was held? I mean, it seems the intimidation and the use of firing and the police, it sounds like a very horrendous condition of workers who speak out for their rights and shop stewards. Is that the case?
Absolutely, Steve. So I testified for Erek at his case, and basically, I was just asked questions about how prior elections were run. in the years leading up to this one. And they asked me like, where's the campaign literature usually posted at? And I told them, we have a designated section in each garage. We have 7 garages. Each garage has a designated area where you can post your campaign literature, and most of the times Erek Slater's material didn't stay up, while his opponent Keith Hill did. And management and CTA had their hand in this election, and it was clear as day they didn't want Erek Slater to win. So they did everything they could. He came to my garage, and a senior manager, big swole guy, 250 pounds, big muscles, came out and said, Erek, you can't be here. You have to leave. And but wouldn't give him a reason why. And so they called the police on him, had him gone. And basically every garage he went to, they called the police on him. And that's just horrible that you can get on the ballot for your union president, but you can't go to where the union workers are.
And he was running for president of ATU241. You had a battle to get on the ballot in that local as well. And yet, when you got on the ballot and you tried to campaign and talk to the members, it seems like there was conspiracy to prevent you from even reaching the members. And this is supposed to be illegal, taking away the rights of workers to run an election. Brad, why don't you talk about the legal precedent of what you've won and the whole issue of worker rights, because it's not just applicable to this case, but many others where workers are intimidated, threatened, in some cases coerced not to even run, so that they don't know what their rights are and they can't really fully participate in a democratic union election.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks again for having me. What this case really came down to is this was a criminal charge brought against Erek, a criminal trespass where the CTA was claiming that Erek trespassed when he was on CTA property campaigning. Now, the Illinois Public Labor Relations Act protects the right to have access to employees and union members on company property. So Erek absolutely had the legal right to be in that break room campaigning, and he was going around the various garages, going to break rooms, which has been going on throughout the entire time that these campaigns have been taking place. And that's exactly what we called Erek to testify to on at our hearing on Friday. Now, really what's important here is this is CTA management calling on the police to interfere with what's really a labor dispute, and this is what we've seen throughout history here in the United States, where the police are being used as a tool by capitalist management, by the bosses, to suppress workers. And really what this was an internal struggle, internal to the union, that the CTA management put their fingers on the scales and tried to interfere and actually use the police to do that. And so this ended up in criminal court. So Erek was facing criminal charges because of this. And as he mentioned, my prior counsel, a colleague of mine, Jim Fenerty, he drafted a motion to dismiss, saying just that this is unlawful prosecution of Erek. And we supplemented that. We also discussed some of the First Amendment issues involved, the fact that they were really targeting Erek for the content of his speech. And that was even clear in the arrest report. It said that he was on property, quote unquote, promoting union agendas, end quote. So that made it clear that their reason for wanting him off the property was because he was, quote unquote, promoting union agendas, which really what that meant was promoting workplace democracy. So we filed this motion, we filed a supplement, we provided case law, and we held a hearing. And at that hearing, Robert testified and Erek testified. They both laid out the facts about how these union campaigns take place, how these elections take place, that other people are allowed to campaign in the break room, that even members of the public on occasion can come into these break rooms, and that Erek was being denied access to that break room and they were prosecuting him for it. Ultimately, the judge heard testimony from Erek and from Robert, and he heard our arguments as well as the arguments from the prosecution. And he ruled that the Illinois Public Labor Relations Act requires employers to allow elected representatives like Erek was at that time as a board member, and to have access to his union members that he has not only a duty and a responsibility to, but an obligation and interest in fighting for their interests and having a session and speaking to them about their concerns. So it was a significant victory because it's a rare instance where a criminal charge is dismissed outright like this, but it also shows both how egregious the CTA was by their actions and how strong and powerful Erek's organizing was, and the solidarity and support both from active CTA employees like Robert, as well as retired CTA employees, as well as social justice activists that came out to the courtroom in solidarity. I think that really had an impact on the judge, that the judge saw that this was not a matter of some disruptive former employee trespassing. What this was somebody who was actively trying to fight for justice within the workplace and within the union, and that the boss was trying to use the police to shut that down.
And I saw the press conference that you had, and it was good presentations by workers, that this is not just about you, Erek, but also other workers. The right of all workers to have the right to speak up and fight for themselves and their members. Now, Erek, they charged you with leading a wildcat strike. That's one of the charges that they had. It seems like they've targeted you in order to intimidate the membership, not just yourself. And has that had much effect on the members? It seems like despite that, members are still coming forward to defend you.
Yeah, no, it's hard to believe. I was a board member for about 10 years, and they had the police come in dozens of times just to my bus garage. Like I said, I was fired twice, and it is definitely intimidating. When I was fired the second time, they brought in somewhere around 10 workers and forced them to come to the manager's office and to try to write testimony against me. Nothing sticks in any of that stuff. We have had a lot of difficulty asking our coworkers to testify. Robert's very brave here. We've had a few dozen other workers who've done this. You face retribution, and I know Robert can talk more about this, but it's two ways. Sometimes you feel like you're not really protected by the union you're part of, and so if you're not part of like the clique that's supporting that particular group in power in the union, then it can feel like you're being faced by attacks in several directions. And management definitely, they had the police in our garage many times, totally inappropriate, totally trying to intimidate workers, and it has its major effect. We're going to trial in a few days again for an unfair labor practice charges against the employer for the termination, and it's been a real struggle to protect workers, to make sure that they can testify to the truth of what happened. And so that it's taken 3-4 years finally to get to court, and this whole time workers have been largely without a union rep. We just finally had an election to have a new rep, but for well over a year, almost 2 years, it was almost like we didn't have a union. And that's, how dare you have a union rep of your choosing that has an independent, that helps to put forward an independent voice of the workers, independent of management. Well, then they're going to go after those workers for electing that representative, and harm those families. So that's what's happened. It's really been a horrible situation. But I would say that this victory that we just had helps to build some confidence. It helps to help other workers who want to become stewards, that say, hey, we do have these rights that can be defended, and we can use them, especially if we get help. There's been a lot of different groups, like Brad was talking about, that have come in and helped, and there's so many you can't even recognize all of them. But we have a lot of stuff online; people can look through the details. But this is definitely a victory. More hopefully will come.
And you also have the case of Valerie Jefferson, who was a president of a local in Louisiana. And she was targeted by management. They fired her, and then a pro-management candidate won the election. They basically were targeting somebody was standing up for the membership, and that's why she was targeted. Robert, maybe you can talk about where the ATU was in the local and nationally, because I know that there was an appeal to the ATU International to take this case up. It seems like when a worker, a representative is targeted by the police, that's something that a union should say, we're not going to stand for that. We're going to fight that because it could affect the entire membership and the entire union. Can you talk about that, Robert, and what you see as a problem as far as the union backing up the members who stand up for the membership?
Well, our union, unfortunately, is infiltrated and controlled by CTA. Our employer, CTA, owns our union, and it should be that way. So they collaborate, management and union collaborate to get members fired, to get members disciplined. You know, they're working against me right now. Management is working with the union to prevent me from going to my own union meeting right now. That's what I'm dealing with.
How are they doing that? How do they do that?
Well, basically, the union president calls up his buddy, which is the manager over my garage, and say, hey, I don't like the fact that Robert's coming to every meeting every month. Try to block him. Don't let him trade his off days. Don't let him take a vacation day. Make sure he's at work on the union meeting day. We don't want him here. He asks too many questions. And it's horrible when the union is collaborating with the employer. And it's only 2 members out of 3,000 members that come to the union meeting. And that says a lot about how the members discuss and low morale they have for our union officials. They want change. They really do. Erek Slater got a lot of votes, and that was even with the CTA suppressing him from coming to the different locations to campaign, getting him arrested, and all the other crazy stuff that they're doing. So we definitely need reform in ATU241. They're being investigated right now by the U.S. Department of Labor because of some of the financial issues that they have with mission checks and other financial issues. So we don't know what's going to happen with our local, but we hope that we can get reform and we can get change soon.
And Brad, do you think that there was a conspiracy between the management and the union officials? I mean, it sounds like from what Robert is saying, this is continuing, that management is colluding with the union together to prevent members from even attending union meetings.
Yeah, we were trying to get as much information as we could about that in terms of the forces behind this that were really driving, calling the police there. What the state produced to us in the criminal case did not reveal very much information. But from what I understand, based on what I did see and based on conversations with Robert and Erek and other workers, that is the case here. That this is certainly CTA was pushing for this prosecution. And that became clear based on my interactions with the prosecutor that CTA wanted to see Erek prosecuted and didn't want to let that up in any way. And based on what the information that we have is that union management, that it was a union management collaboration there, that it was the people that were CTA's preferred candidates. And the exact reason that Erek was campaigning was being critical of that sort of close collaboration between the union and the bosses, and to really have some true workplace democracy there. And, obviously Erek and Robert can talk to that with much more experience and more information than me about the depth of how deep that goes. But through the prosecution of Erek, it was clear that this was something that the management was pushing with the collaboration or backing of elements within the union.
And Robert, what are the conditions? Because I know the issue of transit drivers, violence, tax on transit drivers, working conditions, health and safety conditions, stress. I mean, you're dealing with the public. You're dealing with a lot of angry people in some cases. I mean, it's very difficult being a transit worker in this country. What were some of the issues that brought you into activation to look to the union to deal with in your job and the job of other workers?
Well, I would say safety is a top priority right now. You know, COVID didn't start it, but it definitely sped it up. Where we got angry customers, we got buses missing off the street, we got less drivers. We still got over 300 drivers short. They hired 1,000 workers supposedly, so they're starting to bring back service to pre-pandemic levels. But we're still dealing with the stress of angry customers. Uh, they have improved. They have put improved shields in, but the working conditions haven't gotten better, and they're still treating us like crap. And that's the main thing. If you want to keep your workers, then you have to treat the workers that you do have good. You have to appreciate them. You know, we just celebrated Transit Appreciation Worker Day on March 18th. And, you know, with one day a year, you would think that your employer will really show up and show out for that day. It was lackluster. They gave us donuts and coffee. That was it. So, you know, most of my workers have low morale because of these issues. When you first come to work at 4 a.m., the first thing they want to do is discipline you. You know, when you first check in, who wants to deal with that? No bathrooms at the end of the line. You got a porta potty. Who wants to use a porta potty and it's 2 degrees outside? You got to use the bathroom on a block of ice with a broken lock, with no hot water, with no security. I mean, come on. In 75 years, they can't figure out how to build a damn bathroom, a brick and mortar bathroom with running hot water, with heat, with lights, with security cameras. They just celebrated a 75-year anniversary last year, and they still can't figure out how to build a bathroom. I don't get it. You know, they passed a $2 billion budget at the beginning of the year. Seems like they got the money to build the bathroom, but they just don't have the will to do it. And the union is not saying nothing about it because they're laying in the bed with the CTA, so they don't care. Whatever favors they can get, they're happy with. So they say the answer to the bathroom issue is you can take a personal along the route. You can stop your bus along any route, and you can go in a McDonald's or a Family Dollar or any business and use the bathroom. But that's not ideal in most situations, because when you come back, the customer's going to be mad, ready to beat your ass because you done held them up, made them late to work. So we need to put pressure on our employer to build bathrooms, to get real safety. We need real safety, not unarmed security guards like they got now. $100 million going down the drain on unarmed security guards and K9. We need real security. We need the police to ride the buses again. And we need armed security guards, in my opinion.
Well, this social crisis, and it's the same in a lot of cities. You've got desperate people, you've got homeless people, you have mentally ill people in the streets, and they're not being taken care of. They're cutting back. People can't get health care. I mean, it seems like there's a whole social crisis, and the transit workers, public workers, are facing the brunt of this social crisis. Erek, this issue of protecting drivers, protecting the transit system and the workers seems to be a major question in Chicago at CTA.
Oh yes, it makes the news every few days. The violence on, especially the Red Line, but not much of the violence is not reported on. The violence against the bus operators, the frontline workers, the combined rail operators, it's certainly every day, and it's also the verbal of violence. You know, the calling the female bus operator B or something. You know, or or the other kind of violence where they call in the manager's office to put some false complaints on us. There's all kinds of stuff happening. I was a shop steward for 10 years, so I saw a lot of this. And what Robert's talking about, it's when I say it's a war, it's a class war. It's this sort of management group that over us, that has this huge labyrinth of rules that is selectively applied in order to sort of keep us in check. You know, we're an impressive group of people. There's no doubt about it. The frontline workers, the maintenance workers of the Chicago Transit Authority and Pace Suburban as well. We're leaders of families. We're leaders of communities, and we make a very positive impact on the region. And just a few thousand people. We're certainly overworked. Robert was just talking about some of the recent gains in ridership, but it's been about 3 to 4 years where we've been running ragged, where the system has been all over the place, and many workers are having packed buses, and of course the passengers are facing that. During the pandemic, it was all a big mess where people are crammed into buses, especially in the sections of the city which were African American, Latino, less wealth. We're facing these kind of conditions. I would say that in response to the social crisis, part of the reason why they had me fired and why they were so afraid. I mean, we've had several events at my bus garage over the years. When I was fired in 2016, we had some Fight for 15 activists came out to support me. The teachers union had a strike, and the Chicago Transit Authority was very afraid that these activists were going to block the buses from going out. I mean, that's not what our intention was. No one was talking about that, but they were so afraid of that. When if you recall, during the summer of 2020, there was, and Robert can talk about this a bit too, there was, violence against the bus operators, certainly the buses. We were, spray painted eggs, beating on the things and so on. And the weekend that, I was fired, or the events of that, is quite a rebellion going on. They had closed down the drawbridges in Chicago around it, so people couldn't. They shut down the service for public transportation into the center of the city, and the union officials, which I fought at that time as an executive board member, the union officials were talking directly to the mayor and not to us, not to the members of the union, not getting approval of this very serious thing of cutting down public transportation to try to shut down the protest movement. But at that time, the real opportunity was the union movement could have entered into this social justice fight. We could, in our union uniforms, in the proud uniform Robert's wearing now, could have joined the non-violent demonstrations that were going on around the world. And in Chicago, there was unions leading them. And our union did not, because of some of the reasons what we're talking about here, because it's really captured by the employer and by the city administration. And had we joined these public demonstrations, I think they would have had a much different character. Many people were frustrated. There was a focus on the petty violence, and instead, if respected transit workers and other working class families were to lead this, then I think we would have gotten a lot more done in terms of pushing back the systemic racism, the violence against especially African Americans. And that's the reason. It was that they did not want us to discuss this issue as a union. That's why the freedom of speech issue is so important, especially at the workplace, especially inside the working class. And that's why they don't want any elected leaders in serious organizations such as the Amalgamated Transit Union to actually be able to communicate with workers. And that's why they've kicked me off property so many times.
And we're coming on to May Day 2024. Chicago is an important place in the history of May Day, the fight for the 8-hour day, and also the repression against the labor movement, the death of workers during Haymarket. And we have a situation where the U.S. Congress, it seems the priority is to send another 60 billion, 80 billion to Ukraine, send more money to Israel. When they don't have money for the infrastructure, they don't have money for healthcare for working people in this country, but unlimited funds to go for wars. Brad, the history of working people in this country, it seems, is a struggle for basic rights, human rights, but it seems like the priority of this country is something different than the needs of working people.
Absolutely. And this is something that I'm very committed to with people through People's Law Office, and I'm a proud member of the National Lawyers Guild, that part of our ethos is that human rights is more important than property interests. And that's something that we fight for, because what we see is that the people in power, the bosses in the world, try to use the law to repress people, to strip away people's rights. And that the role of lawyers is to provide support to those movements that are fighting for justice, that are fighting against oppression, that are directly confronting capitalist exploitation and directly confronting racism. And there's a long history of that here in Chicago that I'm very proud to be part of that legacy, that people are out in the streets, like you said, going back to Haymarket, fighting against exploitation, fighting for true justice. And that's something that we continue to see the courts becoming more and more reactionary. We continue to see see it clearly that the law isn't the tool that's going to bring our liberation. It's just something that we need to be able to be using as another forefront for the struggle. And that true change is going to be coming through organizing and collective struggle. And that means struggle in the workplace, in the streets, in our neighborhoods, everywhere.
And Robert, you've stood out and put yourself on the line to back up Erek and to back up yourself and your fight for rights and to speak out, even to go to union meetings. How do you see taking this forward? Because, I mean, this victory is an important step. Are people encouraged that Erek has won this case? They forced them to drop the charges. And how can the members take this forward?
Well, they can keep supporting Erek by coming to his next court case, and they can do something small, which is come to the union meeting. I mean, 2 members out of 3,000 members, that's horrible. That just tells you what confidence they have in our union right now. They don't have much, if any at all. So we hope that the members will, CTA and the union, they like to put a lot of fear into workers. They say that we can't strike. There's a no strike clause. They come up with all these lies and stories, to make it so we don't organize. But people like Erek, myself, Eric Bazier, Chicago Transit Justice Coalition, we're educating the members to let them know we need to organize. CTA is going to keep up their mess. We're trying to silence workers. We're trying to shut us down. But as long as you're doing your job and following the rules, they can't get rid of you.
And Erek, you've persevered for years now in this fight. So it says something that you are not going away. You're continuing to drive a bus, not with CTA, with another company, but you're not going away. I think that should be encouragement to other workers. You can stand up and you're not going to be crushed. So other workers, I know in ATU, they've gone after workers. President in, I think, Lansing, Michigan was fired. They're trying to get rid of those union people who stand up for the members. So you think this should be spread out nationally in ATU so that the ATU as a national union says we're not going to tolerate management going after members who stick up, stewards and others who stick up for our rights as union members?
Yeah, a lot you said there. There's some reform groups nationally. There's certainly discussion. It's outrageous that the ATU International has not intervened in this interference in a local union. We're one of the largest local unions in North America, Canada, and the United States. We have written formal requests of several administrations, both the Hanley administration and now the current administration, and they have refused to assist in defending our own organization. So that definitely needs to change, and they need to be held accountable for that failure to defend our own organization that is such a powerful, over 100-year-old organization all over North America. It was such a beautiful thing to see all these younger people, out at the actions coming. Some of the younger activists and they've been going to the properties. Robert and I and others, just these, socialists and others and social justice activists are coming out and they're meeting transit workers for the first time. They're just starting to see the class war. And then, we went out to my bus garage a few days ago and I got to, on the sidewalk, they'll put me in jail if I go, I guess not now that we've won this, but at that time, the judges were telling it, literally, they were saying, if you go back to the property, we're going to put you in jail. I mean, Robert can talk about that. It's a little rough. And so I was talking to some of the new workers, and they have these badge numbers that I had never seen before. They're in the 60,000, 70,000s now. I was a 40,000 badge. So, I was talking to some of the workers and it's the same stuff. I was a shop steward helping the newer workers for 10 years. And it's the same stuff. They're on 5 months of probation. 3 strikes, you're out. Your sink or swim situation where they're starting. You have very little rights, when you first start. And so we're seeing these new groups of workers organizing, and you kind of have a longer view of this. Like I said, like you were saying, going back to Haymarket, back to the 19th century in Chicago, but there's certainly also other the Black Power movement, the fight for civil rights. There's still people alive that were participated in that, and they're still helping out and helping workers to organize little groups off property or on property, and then it's just irrepressible because I see this tension, huge, especially at this workplace. There's this huge tension with how amazing we are and it, you know, we don't, a passenger on the bus can't really see it, right? You know, we're looking at 13 different mirrors and all these cameras on us, right? We're safely operating the bus, and we're just so cool about it. You know, no one sees how much work and how much experts we are at it. And then we go home, we lead our families, men and women, and this force, we're so disrespected on, even though we're so powerful. And it takes such an effort by really the city ruling class for generations to repress us and to keep our organization from coalescing into such a powerful union as the Amalgamated TransUnion Local 241 and our sister Local 308. So it's going to continue one way or another. So just it's our responsibility as social justice fighters to not accept, to keep on fighting and not to accept any kind of long-term defeat here, because if we do, then that discourages people from doing it. And I think this victory does the opposite. It encourages workers, and I'm very proud that we did this. I'm grateful to the People's Law Office and other lawyers to do that, and certainly grateful for the brave workers that have stood up to the workplace threats and otherwise to speak the truth.
Okay, well, I want to thank all of you for joining us. We've been talking with Brad Thomson with the People's Law Office in Chicago, Robert Thomas, who's a CTA worker, a member of ATU 241, and Erek Slater, who is a fired worker at the CTA, was on the executive board of ATU Local 241, and just recently won an important victory against the police who illegally charged him criminally because he was speaking to the members and trying to fight to win an election as president of the union. So thanks for joining us on Work Week, and we want to continue to follow up this struggle, because it's not just about your case, Erek. There are many, many workers in this country who face similar kinds of attacks, and it's a collective struggle. We have to fight collectively. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Steve.